Hello everyone, Torvald here, and I'm back with another story from the good old days. So this story takes place, many mumble number of years ago, at something that in the West Kingdom is known as the Crapaud Tournament. So a little bit of a history lesson first. Crapaud is the French word for toad, not frog, toad. And it was apparently the nickname of a fairly famous French knight. The name at the moment escapes me, but the tournament is dedicated to his honor and memory. And it was started by Sir Obadiah the Obstreperous and a number of his other knight friends as a way to help train their squires. Now, this is not a formal tournament in the sense that it is on the kingdom calendar. It's actually a fighter practice, kind of almost a private household type fighter practice. It was originally just for these knights and their squires and anyone else that they invited to. And eventually they opened it up to a lot of other people because it sounded like so much fun, people wanted to come. Now, this tournament was held once a month, and in fact is still being held once a month. It actually managed to survive the COVID pandemic intact in terms of its consistency. There were 3 members of a household that were all housed together, and so every single month they got together and the 3 of them fought the Crapaud to keep it going. And so as a result, there is now over 300, count the months, 300 plus Crapaud tournaments that have been fought. Now, when I still lived in the West Kingdom, I went to 3. I didn't get to make it very often, but I did go. And I actually have video proof of at least one of those. I actually made it 3 rounds. You have to understand that this is a fighter practice that has a lot of kind of cream of the crop fighters. There are a lot of very good knights that attend this. Viscounts and counts and earls and dukes tend to come to this practice, and they bring their squires with them. So there's a bit of a mix of the unbelts, but it really is tilted in some ways kind of heavy towards the chivalry. At any rate, the way that this tournament is held, though, and the reason for it, was to help their squires get over a thing in our group known as tourney choke. You fight fine in practice, you fight fine in training, you fight fine at war events where there's large groups of people, but the moment you get in a formal one-on-one situation, you choke. You do one of 2 things. You either freeze, lock up, and don't fight well and get taken out really quickly, or you get so hyped up and pumped up on adrenaline you don't feel anything that anybody throws at you, and so you shrug off what we would call a telling or counting blow. So they started doing this tournament in the formal format. Okay? People sign up to the list table, and everybody starts in a big circle, and they pass around a bottle of wine. Each person takes a sip or spills a little. If they don't drink alcohol, they can just spill a drop on the ground. They introduce themselves, and then they may also talk about something that happened since the last time they attended the tournament that really inspired them or really made a point to them about the chivalry. Being a member of the chivalry or acting in a chivalrous or honorable or courteous manner. So these things, and the point is to try and help you to engage in public speaking, because occasionally at a tournament you are going to have to do that. Sometimes you are going to have to introduce yourself to the royalty who are running the tournament. And if it's a different type of formal tournament, you may have to give a little speech of some kind when you're introduced. So each person, as the bottle comes around, they introduce themselves and they talk about any of these other things that might have happened. I myself, at one point, just recited some poetry, Norse poetry, because that was something that inspired me. So this tournament has been going on, as I said, for over 300 consecutive months. I know that when the pandemic actually really does wind down enough that they can get together for a big one, they're going to hold a 300th Crapaud anniversary tournament of celebration of some kind. They weren't able to actually do that for the 300th because it happened during the shutdown, but they are going to do it. So, at any rate, let's get into this. This particular story actually isn't as much about what I just talked about as a fight between me and a very good friend of mine, Sir Daniel of Aquitain. Daniel is now a Viscount as well as a knight. It means he's been prince once. And it also has to do with explaining something to people who don't fight but watch the fights. There's a reason why we don't have a judging system when it comes to counting or telling blows. And the reason for that can often be that something that looks good from the outside isn't good on the inside. That's why it's left up to the two people fighting. The two people fighting make the call about whether a blow was good or not. Okay? They may ask an observer, usually the marshal, what they saw if something felt a little odd or weird. But there's so many factors that come into play when you're fighting that can throw off the calibration of the shot that just hit you. Number one, our weapons are not steel. We're using weapons made out of rattan. It's kind of like a solid bamboo. Okay, it's very fibrous. It flexes a little bit when it hits. Still hits pretty blade hard, believe me. We got plenty of bruises and broken bones behind us to prove that. But basically, it's a type of club. And it hits pretty solidly, as I just mentioned. But when it dies through use, one of two things can happen. Either one, it might snap off, and it snaps off clean. No sharp, jagged edges like you would get with a regular type of wood. But also, it could do what we call brooming out. When I say it's like a solid bamboo, it's actually a grass. It only superficially looks like bamboo on the outside. The inside is this solid core of fibers. And if it's beaten enough, it starts breaking those fibers apart, and it can end up with them brooming out, going. And it's not always noticeable because our swords are all taped up. We usually give them a wrap of strapping tape that has the fiberglass in it, and then we cover that strapping tape with other types of tape, Gorilla tape, gaffer's tape, duct tape, hockey stick tape, but we cover up that. So because of that, you can't always tell when something has started to broom out. And so, believe me, when you get hit with a sword that is brooming out, it really doesn't feel good and solid on the receiving end. It may feel good to the person who hit you with it because of the amount of impact and vibration that are coming up the arm, but because it's mushing out into those fibers, when it connects with us, we don't feel it well. It's almost like you just grazed me, or it just didn't feel right. So often, if I've noticed that somebody's gotten a shot through my defenses a couple of times, I'll ask them, I said, you know, you're getting through. They're not feeling any very good. Would you check your weapon, make sure it's not brooming out and dying? And if the case is that, no, there's nothing wrong with the weapon, then I'll turn to the marshal and I'll go, can you tell me, am I catching some of this? Is he bouncing off of something? Is the angle wrong? What is it that's happening? The other thing is, if I'm hitting my opponent, now remember, I just said he's hitting me, so I'm assuming that there's something wrong on my end in some way. Either the weapon is dying or something else is going on. Well, obviously, sometimes it might be me questioning what's going on with my opponent. And it's not that I'm accusing them of cheating or shrugging stuff off. It's, I'll stop the fight if something's going on. I'll say, you know, I've gotten through a couple of times on that leg there. My weapon seems to be fine. Are you just not feeling it? Do you think, is it bouncing off of something? Is it catching? Is it ricocheting? What? You know, so my assumption is not that they're cheating, but maybe that something is going on that is preventing them from feeling the blow properly. And again, I might ask the marshal who's observing, saying, am I hitting something else? Am I catching on something? And sometimes these people will be able to help you figure out what's going on. It's all an honor system. Do some people take advantage of it? In a group as large as ours, it's going to happen. Okay? Sometimes it's accidental, though. Sometimes, again, it's that tourney choke thing I just talked about. They're so hyped up and pumped up on adrenaline, they're just not feeling the impacts. But we do occasionally have an issue, and we usually catch it, and we usually deal with it, usually by suspending somebody if it's a bad enough offense. We might pull their authorization to fight for a while. So there's a lot of things that can happen there. But this story, again, I know I haven't gotten to it yet. This story kind of deals with that whole thing of you can't judge it from the outside. Only the guys in the armor doing the fighting can really judge what's going on. So at this Crapaud, one of my fights, and I don't remember if it was second or third round, was against Daniel of Aquitain. So Daniel and I square up, and remember, we're holding this as a formal tournament. So the herald announces us, we do our salutes, we salute the Crapaud, we salute the fleur, the holder of honor, we salute each other and our consorts if they're there. If they're not there, we may still salute off to the direction where they are at home. And then we will salute each other, and then the heralds and marshals will yell, "Lay on," and we have at it. So that's exactly what happened. They yelled, "Lay on." Daniel and I went at it, and we just start whipping things out there. And we're hammering at each other really good, and we managed to leg each other pretty close together. It wasn't, I don't remember who got the leg first, but it wasn't very long after that the other guy got the leg. So we're both down on our knees. In the SCA, if you get hit in the legs with the telling blow, you drop down to your knees to signify a lack of mobility and put you at a disadvantage against your opponent. Yes, I know a leg blow would probably kill me from shock and blood loss. We're all great heroes from the sagas. We can fight with wounds. Okay. So Daniel and I are hammering at each other, and we're flailing away. But you know the thing is, both of us are getting things through. Just kind of dink here, dink there. In some cases, one of us will throw a shot at the other guy's head, and we'll just kind of duck out of it, and it just barely glances off the top. When you've got a really smooth, domed top that has some nice angles to it, we call them glancing angles, and you can sometimes just tilt your head enough so that the sword just kind of skips off. Body shots, again, we're throwing things around. Nothing is really sticking. Nothing is really getting there and landing solid. We're either bouncing off of each other's sword, or we're bouncing off of each other's shield, or we're moving in a way that doesn't allow the sword a solid impact. Yes, even from our knees, it's possible to turn and twist your torsos in ways that would lessen the effect of a shot. And we're both actually laughing. There was at least twice, I think, that we stopped and just kind of chuckled and laughed and then went back at it. But then finally, Sir Obadiah stops the fight. And he comes over and he starts to talk to us, and he says, you know, and he's looking at me when he says it. He says, you know, you seem to be getting hit an awful lot, and you don't seem to be taking it. And Daniel immediately speaks up and goes, no, not a problem. I'm catching a lot of his shield. I'm ricocheting off of his sword. It's just nothing's quite landing. He's doing the same thing to me. And Obadiah immediately gets back up, and he says, you're right. I'm sorry. Just letting you know what it looked like from the outside. But you're right. It's between you two. I'm sorry. And he steps out. We go back at it, and Daniel gets me very shortly afterwards. So that's a story from the good old days. Long roundabout way to get to the actual story itself, but unfortunately a lot of that really did need a lot of explanation. So thank you very much, and I'll see you next time.